And let's jump into this by actually addressing what I affectionately call the activist industrial complex. We often hear activist movements being described as part of the democratic process uniquely. And if you ask me, activism is a form of antagonism, is it not? It would seem to actually be a failure of democracy, wouldn't it? I always found that strange. Say, oh, go out there and protest. It's part of your democratic right or force. As but if people protest, that means that the systems of feedback in society aren't really working. So they have to yell at the wind for a while and hope for the best. That's not an efficient system of democratic input. It's almost kind of tragic that people would even think that. Uh, that's kind of silly if you think about it. But that's secondary to what I'm going to be talking about now. Today, every activist, commentator, writer, podcaster, filmmaker, every NGO and nonprofit, even every political party is in fact, as their first priority, going to be concerned with financial survival before anything else. And they will move towards necessitating that at the expense of true, honest intent. People often use the phrase selling out when motivations become more about comforts and gains in a given situation, as opposed to objectivity, autonomy, bravery, challenge, and so forth. But today, virtually everyone has sold out before they even begin because of the requirement of financial survival, which is why the nature of activism as we experience it, whether via social media or news networks or books, films, whether on the street as well, is highly uniform in what it does. There's a distinct needed fashion inherent to the activist industrial complex, and perhaps the first thing to be sacrificed is the offering of solutions. People will happily listen to critiques and criticism, but the moment you say, well, here's something we can do to change things, everyone's back goes up for some reason, even in just conversation. It's very fascinating. And the only solutions that are to be discussed are once again in-system solutions as opposed to out-system solutions, as I've talked about. Out-system meaning solutions that actually challenge the very structure of the society, which is what rewards the activist agent via income and, for many by extension, status, be it sales, donations, sponsorship, YouTube followers, monetization, whatever. And the emphasis here isn't on the obvious nature of this reality, which is not profound to point out, as it's not just a problem for activists, it's a problem for literally everyone in society, as the old phrase goes, not to rock the boat. To move against the system is to slap the hand that feeds you, quite tragically. But to understand just how detrimental this basic force of loyalty truly is, because the limits of debate that result as a consequence of this homogenization serve as a form of paralysis in both the nature of analysis and the nature of action and influence, normalizing the limits of debate. And I routinely point this issue out because self-awareness about the inherent cognitive dissonance is a productive position, as difficult as it is for people to emotionally take. Like an alcoholic, the person has to admit there is a problem occurring. We have to recognize this system-level gravitation to begin working against it, broadening the envelope, and nullifying those reinforcing limits of debate. It needs to become fashionable, so to speak, to truly move against the system and not fear its reprisal. It needs to become a trend to want to propose radical solutions and methods, because today it's almost non-existent. There's nothing that makes me cringe more than things like protest signs that say something like, change the system. We see that. It's become an emerging slogan. Yet few seem to know what they're even saying because there's no literacy on the issue, aside from programs like this that barely survive in this activist industrial complex, speaking from the wilderness to a very small group of people. People seem to think in this sort of change the system phenomenon that's in the periphery that change just means more regulatory intervention against markets, essentially, or the political system, or some kind of combination of the two. Not understanding that the only true form of system change has to move against the source of all the crises we see, which requires the dismantling of market economics. The abolition of capitalism is the only potential workable goal. In fact, I would go so far to say that The marginalization and limits of debate set forth by the vast majority out there in the activist community are doing far more harm than good. And I get it. Some say, well, it's better to get people talking about society and its problems rather than just talking about video games or celebrities, right? Well, of course, but to a degree. And it creates a normalization process, constantly reinforcing subjects and conditions that aspiring new youthful people begin to think that's what they should focus on if you want to join the club of improving society. No, that's not what you do to improve society. This is what you do to be part of the activist industrial complex and survive as a professional social critic or whatever. Greenpeace is an activist institution, is it? Or is it a business that makes money and pays thousands of people a bunch of money and salaries to support their lives by a small, narrow field of engagements, legal pursuits, and so forth? Is it really activist, or is it a self-contained group that has a limited range of debate that really runs in place? Just open any social media or seemingly progressive news platform, podcast, whether mainstream or grassroots, and you'll see this self-contained, homogenized, debate-limited spectacle repeat in a mundane loop, composed of observation, complaint, analysis of corruption, and if you're very lucky, occasionally some crude, vague, in-system set of solutions that have already proven largely ineffective. Or perhaps as an extension of that, they'll invoke historical concepts like socialism and the invocation of worker democracies or worker cooperatives and other really old world counter-capitalist conceptions that suffer from a lack of definition, first and foremost, but also weak historical efficacy. Such are the repeated subjects, observations, and proposals that have been deemed acceptable within the bounds of activist discourse. And it's tragic. It is a critical cognitive dissonance that must be understood. You must feel it. Everyone must feel it. They must accept it. The activist community has to realize it lives in this control system in effect. Because if you at least recognize the pattern and force, you can start to be more conscious. You can probe those limits, eventually breaking this entertainment and catharsis-rooted activist media cycle that has trapped pretty much everyone today in what is really a business and status-minded pathology. Remember, the most powerful form of social control is limiting people's sense of possibility.